Lizzie was a normal woman. She was in her late 30s, moderately pretty. She was single with no children and lived all alone in her little country house. She bought the house because it was in the middle of nowhere, and that was what she preferred. Lizzie had anthropophobia, an irrational fear of people, and as a result, she was extremely antisocial. After moving in, Lizzie lived in the house completely normally. There was nothing strange or ominous about the house, other than the rumours that 11 out of the 14 previous owners had committed suicide in the house. But they were just stupid rumours. After 2.5 years of living there, Lizzie had a strange dream. It was not a nightmare, it was just odd. She dreamed that she was an infant, crying. She was in the arms of her father, and he was saying comforting words to her to soothe her. As Lizzie looked up at her father's face, she saw something disturbing. He had no eyes. He was not faceless, nor did he have dark, empty eye sockets. Where his eyes should have been, there was just skin. He continued to say comforting words and rocking her in his arms. Lizzie woke up. She was not frightened, but slightly disturbed. She shook off the dream, however, and continued her business as usual. Less than a month later, Lizzie had the exact same dream again, with the same reaction. Mildly disturbed, she continued her life without further thought or concern. 4 weeks later, she had the dream again. The next time only took 2.5 weeks to occur. 1 week, 6 days, 4 days, 2 days. Then the dream became a nightly occurrence for Lizzie. By now, she was genuinely scared. She began to dread going to sleep each night, afraid of having the dream. The dream itself was no more frightening than it originally was, but Lizzie was definitely afraid. A week after the nightmare became daily, she began to feel like she was being watched. It started out in small increments. She would start to get that feeling, and she would look around, see nobody, and then feel at ease. But then it became constant. Everywhere Lizzie went, even out of the house, she felt like she was being watched. It got more and more intense as time went on, and the only relief she could get from watching was when she distracted herself with reading, which was one of her favourite pastimes. The image of her eyeless father worked its way into Lizzie's waking hours as well. Whenever she closed her eyes, even for a moment, she saw it. His unmoving face haunted her every hour of the day. She eventually just refused to blink, in fear of seeing his face again. It was nearly impossible, but she tried to keep her eyes open all the time. She lost sleep, sometimes staying awake all night. She went broke, spending most of her money on coffee to stay awake. Still, the eyeless face continued watching. Always watching. One night, Lizzie was sitting at her kitchen table, desperately trying to stay awake and not blink. She began to doze off, and her eyes closed. She saw a horrifying image of herself, with no eyes, just like the vision of her father. Her face was covered with veins of red, with blood flowing from 2 wounds where her eyes should have been. The rest of her face appeared calm and emotionless. Even though her vision had no eyes, Lizzie could tell it was looking straight at her. Lizzie screamed at the top of her lungs and tried to open her eyes, but they would not open. She panicked, pulling on her flesh, clawing at it until she could feel her own warm blood trickling down her face and hands. The vision persisted, still staring at her with absolute intent. Lizzie shouted, "Stop it! Stop watching me!" She started to sob uncontrollably and scream for help, even though nobody was within 10 miles of her house. "Somebody help me!" Lizzie crawled to the kitchen and fumbled in her drawer for a knife. She angrily thrust the knife into her right eye. The eyeless, bloodied face of herself continued to watch her, unwavering. She slid the knife out and shoved the knife into her left eye and twisted it hard. The face continued watching. "Stop watching me!" screamed Lizzie. She shoved the knife into her chest and fell forward, cold, covered with blood, and finally free from the watching. John was just a normal guy. He was in his 50s when he moved into this little country house. There was nothing strange or ominous about the house, other than the rumours that 12 out of the 15 previous owners had committed suicide in the house. But they were just stupid rumours.
Halloween is by far my favorite time of year. The wonderful day where walking around with a mask is socially acceptable. Masks hold quite a unique place in society. A place can transform anyone into something else, turn an actor into a character, hide the secret identity of a superhero, or even allow monsters to walk among men. You never know what's behind a mask until it's taken off. But that's the best part of Halloween. No one is going to take off anyone's mask. There are no gang of teenagers with their talking dog there to strip away my disguise and reveal the truth underneath. No, this is reality. On Halloween, I'm perfectly able to hide in plain sight. Of course, wearing a mask has its own special meaning for me. I am not an actor, superhero, or even a monster. Not even a fictional term, at least. No, I'm simply a mask of a means of entry. Any mask works, really, so long as it covers my face. I manage to use a different one every year. All I need to do is walk the streets of the suburb neighborhood, wave my way through various decorations, and dodge packs of trick-or-treaters until I hear the familiar blaring of loud music, like a sailor at a siren to the sea. I'm drawn to the music, to the party that examines from ye. This is why Halloween is wonderful. No one seems to ask questions at the door of a Halloween party. All I really need to do is knock and the door will open. The mask makes people just assume I'm there for the party. Hell, sometimes people are just leave their front doors wide open, allowing even easier access to their home. On Halloween, no one gives a glance towards a masked man making his way through the midst, which is what makes my hobby so fun. They are completely obvious as I approach their foot, then continue to chatter and gossip as I add my own special ingredient to the bowl of punch. They continue to dance and play as I stab small sharp needles into their chocolate and sweets. It is not until their first friend drops to the floor, either choking from the poison or coughing up blood needles, that people start to panic. It is the same every year. As soon as I leave the party, the chaos rising behind me, an unstoppable grin forms under my mask. Screams of terror are such pleasant noise, and such for a pleasant holiday.
I used to live in a small building downtown. One of the reasons I moved out was the bad neighborhood, including this guy in the apartment right over mine. He was a weird-looking fella who mostly kept to himself. Around midnight, though, there was frequently a strange noise that got on my nerves. It wasn't loud, to be fair, but I have really light sleep, so it was hard to get my eyes shut with those little bumping sounds going on and on. It reminded me of high heels walking about, but not as loud as if the person causing the noise was actually trying to be silent. After a few days, I realized the pattern was always the same, like a recording played over and over with random intervals in between. And that went on for the best part of an year, always the same sequence of bumps, slowly tattooed into my mind, sometimes for hours straight during the night. It was only several years later, helping my daughter with her homework, that I learned a little bit of Morse code. She knocked on the table with her knuckles, and a shiver immediately went through my spine as I recognized that exact pattern. When I asked her what it meant, she laughed. "It's the easiest one, Daddy," she said. "It's the one to call for help."
Have you ever had the satisfaction of of scratching an itch you couldn't quite get to before? He asked, as a gun shook in his nervous and sweaty hands. The sweat poured into his eyes, making vision questionable. He had a gun pointed at the pharmacist, but it wasn't loaded. He wanted to say, "The evaluation from finally quenching a burning desire within yourself that you couldn't quite explain to others. Not fully anyway." The pharmacist just stared, hands raised, eyes bulging with fear, as he waited to see what this lunatic with a gun wanted. That feeling went away, and I want it back. About 6 months ago, he had a doctor thinking he had a combination of severe eczema, athlete's foot, as well as poison ivy. I would say a combined nightmare for hell indeed. Confused, his doctor tried everything. Every allergy pill, cream, lotion, and shot he could think of. No results. Finally, after 4 months of agony, he found something that worked and was in heaven. He could finally sleep. No more tossing and turning from constant scratching and irritated skin. He could shower normally again and wear clothes too. This relief was short-lived, however, as once the prescription ran out, his doctor refused to fill it again, but gave him instead the name of a doctor better suited for his needs. A psychologist. I'm going to see a fucking shrink. He went to every doctor in town, same story, same mumble about the referral and something and blah blah blah. At one doctor's office, he had overheard someone saying something about a note in my chart that had been very public knowledge to any doctor or office wishing to look him up. He didn't know what it said, but he knew it probably wasn't good and definitely the reason for his prescription from the gods going unfilled. So, here we are. You, me, my gun, and my prescription. He points the gun at the terrified pharmacist and says, "Fill it." Sure, man. Whatever you want. The armed man throws this bottle at the pharmacist and thinks this is it. He can finally be at peace again. The pharmacist looks at the bottle, the side note, his public chart, and looks at the gunman and says, "Sir, your chart notes say that the reason you can't get your prescription filled is because, well, it's not the right medicine. An only referred doctor can provide the medicine you need to help you. But there's something else." The gunman looks confused, but still trying to prevent it and yells, "What the fuck are you talking about? Fill it!" Finally, the pharmacist decides if this lunatic is going to kill him, he's going to do whatever it is to give him his meds or not. So he finally says, "Sir, do you know what a placebo is?" The gunman thinks for a second and says, Yeah, I think so. Why?" Hesitantly, the pharmacist says, They gave you a placebo and it worked. And your doctor has in bold lettering that you're in need of anti-hallucinogens. What you have here is a prescription for baby aspirin.
I remember during a particularly vicious era, and the bombings rarely stopped. I would stay at home sitting in front of my television watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes and contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe it was a thinly veiled attempt on the part of the media to use scare tactics to keep kids in place, because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight ideologies. Stuff like, bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part, the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in on an old, rusted, closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for children's programming. Then a text would appear on the screen in Arabic reading, "That's where bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalistic photographer. That show had been in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I'd had enough and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research, and eventually traveling on site, I found out it was now desolate and had been abandoned after the people were ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out, or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of cautiously making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room. After having to break through a few old logs and managing to break the heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room, and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted, caged microphone hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room.
There must be a great many babies born that summer like her baby, Morgan thought. She was trying to comfort herself. She'd seen the headlines. It was happening everywhere, especially in the States. It wasn't just her baby that had turned. Other parents were making the discovery too. Of course, it had happened other years too, nearly always in the summer. Morgan had always glanced at the stories, giving an involuntary shudder, thinking, that poor family, and that poor little baby. But she had never realized that it was an affliction, something that could affect her baby. This did seem to be an especially bad year for this. What? Plague? Mass possession? Whatever it was, Morgan had seen the terrible change come over her own sweet baby. The gleams of cunning in its eyes, the sharp little teeth that began to poke through the gums, the nasty, evil-sounding grunts. The baby even smelled bad, as if the demon thing had taken it over and wanted to poison Morgan with its own rotten breath. It was sly, too. The baby was sweet-smelling and cooed charmingly to everyone else in Morgan's family. Her friends and neighbors often remarked on how adorably sweet and innocent her grins and giggles were. Surely I'm not the only one this is happening to, Morgan told herself again, glancing toward the car seat in the back of her Honda Civic. The demon inside her baby mocked her, drooling and cooing, but Morgan could hear the metallic, grinding notes of its true voice. She would do what dozens and dozens of parents did to end the problem before it got worse. She parked her car at Target, some distance away from any other cars. She got out, wincing at the heat rising off the pavement. 93 degrees today. It should be over soon. She locked her doors and gave one more worried look at what had happened to her baby. She hoped it would be over soon. She turned and walked into the mall across the road.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.